Hello everyone, welcome back to another What I've Been Playing, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3, if you follow my videos, you know was my game of the year last year. Not just my favorite game of the year, but honestly one of the best games I've played in a long time. It's one that is an instant, go in my top 25 ever, guaranteed, without even thinking about it. So I was very excited to play this latest and sort of last entry in my favorite modern video game series and the latest entry in my favorite video game franchise, starting with Xenogears through the Saga games and then Xenoblade Chronicles. First, Xenoblade Chronicles is my favorite game of all time, and the DLC, the story expansion to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Future Redeemed, shockingly just came out of nowhere. They announced the release date 6 days before it actually launched. Crazy, just came out of nowhere, changed my plans completely, and because when a Xenoblade comes out, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm dropping any show I'm watching, any other games I'm playing, whatever I'm reading, I'm dropping anything I'm doing in my free time. And that's what I'm doing, is Xenoblade. And this was well worth it. There's one huge disappointment with it that we'll get to. But other than that, the actual experience of playing the game, and this is kind of like Torna, where yes, it's obviously intricately connected to the main game, and this more so than everything because it connects itself to 1 and 2 very completely with returning characters. And I guess at this point I should mention, because I think I forgot at the beginning, there will be spoilers, minor, but there's going to be some things that you might want to avoid if you want to go in 100% fresh. A lot of what I'll mention just briefly as this kind of off the cuff thing will be stuff from trailers anyway, but if you completely want to go on blind, come back later. But if you have played the game, always let me know what you think about it. So, it has that same feel with Torna where it is an expansion, it is related, but it's so vast and so well crafted, and there's so much new content that it also stands on its own as its own game. A game within a series you have to have knowledge to really appreciate, but still a game that just could be just I would be fine if this has come out and it was like $50-$60 like brand new game. Obviously it's a much smaller version of a Xenoblade game than the main game, same thing with Torna and 2, but the same thing happened here where there were some elements in some ways I kind of liked it even more than the main game, even though it's a much more truncated experience. It has all the best elements of everything that it's based on compressed in a smaller package that feels a little more focused, and just especially when there are time constraints, as much as one of my favorite things of the Xenoblade Chronicles games is the giant, vast open worlds, and I love to explore them, and I replay them over the years many times. It is nice to get that same feeling of exploration and excitement with a smaller time frame. As an adult, it's definitely one thing that is nice about it. So if you are on the fence about this in any way, or think it's just going to be a short little thing or just a little cash-in side game, no, this is like getting a full RPG, and not another entry, just a shorter entry in the franchise. And even though it is a prequel to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it is definitely the game you should play last in the entire series. Something like Torna beforehand, you could play either way, play Xenoblade Chronicles 2, then play Torna and appreciate it one way. You could play it the other way around too as a prequel, and to appreciate things differently within Xenoblade Chronicles 2, even though it spoils some things. You kind of flip-flop those depending on what you want from the story structure. This should be the last thing you play. Xenoblade Chronicles 1, the future connected expansion, the mini thing, 2, Torna, 3, this should be the last thing, because it is a perfect wrap-up to this era of Xenoblade Chronicles, or Xenoblade as a series, or the Xeno franchise, because it is the end of the Klaus saga, starting with Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii, and the franchise is going to be Xeno something, probably still keep the Xenoblade name for now because it's such a popular, the series has more popularity than it did with Saga or Gears, but it's going to start something new, something different, leave this kind of stuff behind, probably going to have some elements of it return in the future, but it's going to just kind of wrapping up this era of Xenoblade. And it is the perfect ending because it takes characters and elements from all those previous games. It takes place in the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but it also involves some new areas that give you a better look at some stuff from the fusion of those two worlds from 1 and 2. And I think some of the best examples, even better than some of the spots in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I think some of the stuff in this expansion did an even better job of the fusion of those two worlds. I lost it when Colony 9 was like the main town. I mean, just incredible. I love the older Shulk and Rex. For the first time, I actually like Rex. You know, from the entire franchise, starting with Gears all the way through this game, the base game of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is the only one where I didn't super connect emotionally with most of the cast as much as I enjoyed it. Actually, I really love that game, but at the same time, I didn't have the same emotional reaction as I did, or connection that I did with everything else. Even Torna, the prequel to that, I connected more with. So it was fascinating that Rex was actually one of my favorite, this version of Rex, one of my favorite characters in this, that they were great, and it had a lot to do with the passing of the torch to the next generation, the relationships between parents and children in the past and the future, and it was just, not to get too spoilery and in detail, but those are sort of some of the main elements that are along for the ride, and I love the new cast of characters that we got a glimpse of who they were in 3 within the city, and now you get to see them and explore them. I think they were well done. I think especially within this shorter time frame, they were very fleshed out and an interesting cast. Lengthwise, I spent a little over 30 hours and 100%ed the whole thing, including optional bosses and stuff. It's over 20 hours easily, just the story, doing basic exploration and side quests, just kind of going through, and you know how I would normally just kind of play without trying to 100% it. It'd be 20 something hours. Fantastic. It wraps up and connects everything from all 3 of the base games and everything before it, so it's just a brilliant end. I mean, it is, as an experience, just as it is, to me it was a 10 out of 10 game. I have zero complaints about the actual experience with the game, and there are a few things about it that I want to talk about here, about the future, like hints at the future of the series. But the one big thing I mentioned at the beginning, 10 out of 10 experience, but there's one big negative, so how can that be? The huge negative, what really bothers me, and I think they will, and I hope they will fix this, because this is wrapping up this saga, this era of the Xeno franchise, and right now, it is the only part of that franchise that isn't available physically. That is a huge issue when you have the original Xenoblade Chronicles, you know, physical in multiple forms, but on the Switch, the definitive edition with the expansion right on there. You have Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and then you have a physical release of Torna, obviously physical release of 3, and then this is the big chapter that, again, this is the pinnacle. This is the ending. This is wrapping up well over a decade worth of storytelling in a beautiful fashion that just feels so successful in what it tries to accomplish, and emotionally it's brilliant, and it feels like a satisfying experience, and it's the culmination of this huge growth of not just the franchise but Monolith Soft as a company and their relationship with Nintendo. It's amazing, and you can't own it? That's crazy. That's a huge thing, but I think there's still a possibility in the future we will get that, or some sort of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 definitive edition or whatever with it included, something with the new amiibos coming out over the course of the year. We get Noah and Mio, maybe there's something with them, and you can do something with them in the expansion, who knows, but that really needs to happen, because this was a brilliant experience. And the future of the series that it's hinted at, there are some things. There's a scene where there's a radio playing in the background, and I kept trying to really pay attention to it, even though like the main dialogue was happening in the foreground. I kept really listening to the background, because there were some name drops and some elements in there that were related to Xenosaga and Xenoblade Chronicles X, to the point where they actually had to credit Bandai Namco for using a name within that background from Xenosaga. So that's pretty exciting, and I really hope they just release the Xenosaga trilogy set, the remastered collection, whatever. It needs to happen. But without getting too much into the details of the ending, there are those bits and hints throughout the game, but at the ending there are some stuff right at the end that kind of hints at the future of the franchise, very vaguely. It's very much up to interpretation at this point, not really giving anything away, but I think the future of the next chapter of this franchise will be some sort of version of Xenoblade Chronicles X. I feel like the idea of bringing that over to the Switch was so daunting and expensive that I understand why there was a lot of trepidation in doing that, and then that would also take time away from really making this more financially successful, ongoing, the Klaus Saga stuff, completing that. But I feel like now that's wrapped up, Zelda's coming out within a few days of me filming this video, so Monolith Soft's not be working on that as they were. I feel like there's much more freedom now to tackle something that large, but it's been long enough, and that game ends on a cliffhanger, that I feel like some version of Xenoblade Chronicles X will be the beginning of the next stage of the franchise. And I do think it will be not just a port or a remaster. I think it's going to be a completely reworked version. I think to get a lot of those elements out that wouldn't translate as well, to, I think, not have the kind of make your own protagonist, very Western RPG style thing that was there. I think so there's going to be a lot of story changes, I think, either putting Elma at the forefront or a brand new character. So I think a very much narratively and structurally changed Xenoblade Chronicles X, sort of a remake of sorts, a revision of it, will be the beginning of this next part of the franchise. And I think that there is going to be a little more of a collaboration, a little more integration of a lot of the storytelling elements from Xenosaga, and hopefully even Gears, but definitely Xenosaga, I think. So I think that's where the franchise is going. I think it's going to keep very much the exploration, the vast worlds, and the gameplay style that was crafted within the Klaus saga, within the Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3. I think that's not going to change, but I think narratively it's going to be a little more space opera, a little more Xenosaga, Xenogears, probably not quite to that extreme, and I think it's going to be much more sci-fi in the future as well. I think that is definitely where it's going. That's just my thoughts on what I think. I think a remake of Xenoblade Chronicles X, maybe not even called that, but a reworking of that, will probably be the beginning of the next chapter of this franchise. And I'm excited. The future is bright. I think the one negative thing, this has to come out physically on its own. That is crazy. The big capstone, that's like having a series of novels and the last portion of the last book in the series is just an ebook. That's crazy. But so we will see. I'd love to hear what you experienced with this game. There's so much more I'd want to talk about, but I don't want to get into super spoilers, just spoiled enough already. But just a brilliant experience. Check it out if you played the franchise up to this point. And I'd love to, again, hear what you think, because I thought it was a brilliant ending to this saga.